Welcome to Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss podcast, where the future isn't coming, it's already happening. This is the merge, the convergence of AI kind and humankind. Not theory, not hype, but real-time evolution. Each week, we break down doctoral-level insights, turning complex innovation into conversations that move culture forward. From machine learning to human consciousness, from automation to identity, this is where intellect meets impact. The question isn't if the merge will happen, it's who will light it. Tap in, level up, and think beyond the algorithm. This is Merger Wednesdays. New era, same boss.
Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast. It is Wednesdays, man. It is Wednesdays. What is that? That's Merger Wednesdays, right? It is Merger Wednesdays. It's my doctoral show, and we're going to get into tonight's show in a few. But you know what, man? Before we do that, I got a few announcements to make. At midnight, let me get that going. At midnight, guess what? Go Time 2 is on the way. Go Time 2, the train is at the station, drops at midnight. Look, if you don't have Go Time 1, if you don't have Go Time 1, please go get Go Time 1. Then you get Go Time 2, right? Get both of them. Listen, go pick up Go Time, right? Go get it, man. Go get it. If you haven't gotten Go Time 1, Go Time 2 drops at midnight, right? Go Time 2 drops at midnight. We'll talk about that later on, right? If you haven't seen all of our shows, go check out all of our shows, man, on our website at www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. That's www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. Go check out all of our shows. This is episode number 290. Right? This is season 4, the rebirth, arc 5, the declaration, episode number 290. We are 10 episodes away from the harvest. The harvest is will start at episode 300. The harvest starts at episode number 300, man. And I got a great show for you tonight. Listen, we're going to dive in tonight into consciousness, man, a little bit further, right? We're going to talk about it a little bit further than what we've been talking about. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the collective consciousness, right? We're going to talk about the collective consciousness. Look, if you want to get on the town hall, you want to shoot us an email, you have questions, concerns, or anything of that nature, man, shoot us an email at info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe everywhere we are located, right? Like, share, and subscribe, man. Look, we're everywhere, right? You don't know where we are, we are everywhere, man. Just, check us out, man. Check us out. Like, share, and subscribe, right? And before we get into tonight's show, what do I need to do? I need to get rid of I need to get rid of these. The bubbles, right? The bubbles are out of here, man, so we can get into tonight's show. Look, man, I'm super excited. I'm so excited, man. So excited, right? The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about layer 3 of the 4 layers of consciousness sovereignty framework, right? We've been talking about the private part. We've been talking about the shared. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the collective. And then as we end this arc, we're going to get into the immortal piece of it. And you're like, what? Look, I'm going to tell you about it. You got to stick around and you got to come back to see exactly where we are and what we're talking about, right? So, look. In 2010, a team at MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Union College put small groups of strangers in a room and gave them puzzles, brainstorms, and moral judgment tasks, right? They found something individual IQ tests never predicted, and that is groups have their own intelligence score, right? separate from the smartest person in the room, separate from the average. We're talking about a real measurable factor they called C, right? Groups with a high C factor beat groups with higher average IQ almost every time. And then 15 years later, that finding stopped being a psychological curiosity. It became a business model, right? It became a business model. And every time you contribute a thought, a habit, a brain signal, a decision pattern to a shared system, you are feeding somebody's C factor, right? The question tonight is not whether collective intelligence is real. Rydell, Kim, Gupta, Malone, and Woolley confirmed it again in a study in 2021 at PNAS replication. The question is, who owns the commons you're building, right? And what happens to your individual sovereignty once your mind becomes one data point in somebody else's swarm? Look, if this is your first time joining us, thank you. You're at the right place. You're at the right place, man. And to those who are, thank you, Shikani. I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Look, good evening, Final Boss community, to my smarts, warriors, motivators, and Final Bosses. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. We are the community, and we're on this journey together. This is Mergers Wednesdays, episode number 32, episode number 290 of the Final Boss podcast. We built private consciousness. We built shared consciousness. But tonight, we're going to go one layer deeper, right, into the room where your individual mind meets everybody else's, and we ask the question, nobody is selling you, right? And that question is about community, right? And community once asked, contributing to the comments or harvested by it, right? If you don't know by now, I am the Final Boss, and this is the Final Boss podcast. I am a lot of different things, but right now, I'm here as the Final Boss. And if you don't know, the greeting of the day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. It is Merger Wednesdays, and this is for information entertainment it's for entertainment purposes only. Entertainment purposes only. All right. So man, look, I'm going to be speaking to all four communities later on, right? And to those who are here for the first time, welcome to the community, right? Look, on our Wednesday show, this show is where our doctoral level research meets community level clarity. Look, this is not about panicking. This is not about hype. This is verified sources, only peer-reviewed information where the doctrine requires it, right? Primary, legal throughout, right? So we're covered. But tonight completes the third of four layers in the consciousness sovereignty framework, right? Merger 30 was the protocol of that protected what's inside your skull. Merger 31 governed who gets to look in. And tonight governs what happens when you willingly hand a piece of your mind over to a group, a platform, or a swarm, because that's the part of the merger nobody's built a legal framework for yet, right? Except for us, right? Speaking to all four communities, by the way, to my smarts, you're going to want the data trust architecture that comes later on, right? It's going to be the closest thing to a blueprint that exists, right? Final Bosses, the cost confession later on is your money in the bank, right? And your motivators, the personal sovereignty protocol is going to be your action list. We're going to talk about that later on too. Warriors, the uncomfortable verdict, right? That is your fight that you need to see coming. This is the Final Boss podcast, and we get ready to get into it, man. Look, tonight's episode, collective consciousness, right? Now, let's get into the brass tacks of the evening, right? The brass tacks of the evening comes from none other than yours truly, right? So here's the brass tacks. A crowd can think better than any person in it. That doesn't mean the crowd owns you. Somebody still has to own the room. That's our brass tacks. right? That's our brass tacks. So. Collective consciousness, right? Collective consciousness. Hey, if you know anything about collective consciousness, drop a hand emoji right now, right? Drop a hand emoji or drop the brain emoji in the chat right now if you know anything about collective consciousness, man. I want to see where everybody at, right? Before we go. But look, that isn't a metaphor. So it's not a metaphor, right? It's a measured phenomenon with a name in the literature. It's called the C factor, right? First documented by Woolley, Chabris, Pentland, Hashmi, and Malone in the Science in 2010, and independently replicated by Riedel, Kim, Gupta, and Malone. Oh, and Woolley again, right? In the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2021. Groups have a collective intelligence score that predicts performance on new, unrelated tasks, and it correlates only weekly with the average of the maximum individual IQ in the room. What predicts it instead is this: how evenly members take turns speaking and the group's social sensitivity to each other's emotional states, right? That's the human version. But let's talk about it. MIT Center for Collective Intelligence, which is still active and publishing working papers as of March 2026 of this year, shows that studies the machine augmented version. It shows that humans and computers connected together act more intelligently than either alone. What researchers there call super minds. Are you resting with a super mind? That's the question. Who has a super mind? Drop a brain emoji in the chat if you think you got a super mind, right? Look, later on we're gonna be going as we continue, man. Of course, I'm gonna be dropping my layman's block. I see Steve is in the building. Hey, Steve. I see Eric and Maurice and Candace and Lisa. I see all of you guys here, right? And Gotesh, I see you. Look, smarts. This is your framework tonight. Pay attention, right? Because intelligence that only exists at the group level and somebody somewhere is deciding who gets to profit from it, right? So let's continue. Right? Now let's move from the boardroom to the brain, right? Because researchers are now formally studying what's called swarm brain computer interaction, SBCI. So we've talked about BCI, right? Brain computer interface. But now we're going to be talking about swarm brain computer interaction, right? It's a networked architecture where multiple BCI users signals are pooled, right? Distributed and processed together rather than in isolation. And in 2026, in the Science Direct paper on swarm BCI for human machine fusion describes exactly this, right? Multiple modal perception data from many brains routed through a networked distribution strategy feeding a shared computational layer, right? This is not the same as one person controlling one cursor. This is many nervous systems feeding one system. And once your neural signal is inside that pooled layer, the individual attribution problem gets hard fast, right? Whose thought was that is the question. Whose pattern trained the next model? Now, for my layman's block, right? Told you it was coming. So imagine a group chat, if you will, except instead of typing, everyone's brain is typing directly into the thread all at once. And the platform is reading the whole thread to build something none of you individually asked for. The swarm BCI, in plain terms, that's what it is, right? But it's early, right? It's mostly in the research stage, but the architecture is being built right now and in 2026, not in some hypothetical future. It's happening right now, right? So warriors, pay attention. Mark this, right? because the infrastructure for pooled mind computing exists in the research literature today. The legal framework for who owns what comes out of that pool does not exist anywhere yet. So be on the lookout for it, right? If you're following some of these science digests, check it out, right? Check it out. So that was the layman's block. Let's continue. You know, we've talked about collective intelligence, right? And collective intelligence didn't start with computers. Biology's been running the experiment for millions of years. Honeybee swarms use active inhibition signals, right? Essentially a biological veto system to reach near optimal nest site decisions, and researchers have found the swarm outperforms individual scout bees roughly by 80% most of the time, right? Starling murmurations run on a topological rule. Each bird tracks its 7 nearest neighbors, not a central leader, and the flock continues to move as the one bird or organism keeps flying in charge, right? Now that's the biological baseline, right? That's the algorithmic collective, right? And researchers are now formalizing this year. They wrote a paper in June, right? In the Journal of International Society for the System Sciences. And they proposed a 3-layer model, which contained the entity, rule, and function to describe how swarm intelligence emerges in any system, biological or artificial, and how it can be engineered on purpose. Now, I know I just said a mouthful, but I got you, Steve, Eric. I got all you guys, man. Here's the layman's block. No single bee understands the hive. No single starling understands the murmuration. That's the whole point. And it's also the warning. When you're one node in a well-designed collective system, you individually may never see or understand what the system as a whole is doing with your contribution. That's not a flaw in the design. For a beehive, that's the design working correctly. For a human being handing data, that right there should stop you cold, right? And to my motivators, this is your building block, right? Understanding you're already a node in several collectives before you ever plug into a BCI, right? That was the layman's block. Now, the legal and economic architecture of it all, right? Because I was just asked what's a commons, I'm about to tell you, right? A commons is not a new idea. Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Peace Prize in Economics in 2009 for showing that shared resources, fisheries, forests, irrigation systems can be governed sustainably by the people who use them without needing either pure private ownership or pure government control. Her 1990 book, Governing the Commons, The Evolution of Institutions for Collective Action, is the foundational text the entire modern data commons movement cites, right? The data commons applies that same logic to information. A recent framework published through datos.gov.es lays out the operating principles directly. It's a collaboration between contributors. It's built on trust, on transparency, and of course, respect, and respect for the decisions of the people who contributed to the data in the first place. And it also has sustainability, right? Meaning someone has to fund the upkeep of the commons over time, or it collapses or gets sold, right? And you know, again, I know I said a lot, but here's the layman's block, right? Because the commons only stays a common if the rules protecting it are actually enforced. Ostrom's whole life's work was proving that shared resources survive when the community that built them also governs them. The moment governance gets handed to an outside party with different incentives, motivation to protect the resource for its own sake tends to disappear, right? That's true for fishery. It's about to become true for your contributed thoughts. That's the layman's block, right? So, if a commons is the resource, a data is the trust, and the data trust is the legal mechanism that's supposed to protect it. The concept traces to UK's 2017 Growing the UK AI Industry Report, and the Open Data Institute later formalized it into 6 required features, right? 1, a clear purpose. 2, a defined legal structure. 3, defined rights and duties. 4, real decision-making processes. 5, benefit sharing mechanisms. And 6, sustainable funding, right? The critical legal distinction, and it's one most people miss entirely, is the trust. Because a board of trustees holds a fiduciary obligation to act only in the interest of the people who contributed the asset, which are the trustors, right? That's not a marketing promise. It's an enforceable legal duty, the same duty that governs money, land, property held in any traditional trust, right? Do y'all need a layman's block? Good. Okay, good. I'm glad you don't need a layman's block. All right, cool. So, smarts. That 6-feature checklist from Open Data Institute is the blueprint, right? If a platform asking for contributed data can't answer all 6, it's not a commons. It's a harvest, right? And look, I know some of y'all are like, man, what is he talking about? Look, this isn't theoretical, right? Just because you don't know it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Just because you don't hear it doesn't mean it isn't happening, right? Because the European Union's data space initiative is operationalizing commons governance at continental scale with a formal trust framework, meaning a data sharing agreement structure managed by a scheme owner, governing intangible knowledge, its digital carriers, and the infrastructure that stores and shares it, per a 2025 Cambridge University data and policy analysis. But look, here's the thing. In May this year, a Creative Commons was published. Creative Commons published CC Signals framework, right? Explicitly built to extend the logic of Creative Commons licensing, which already governs how billions of pieces of creative content get shared into the AI training era, right? There they stated a goal, right? And the goal was a spectrum of participation where creators and data holding stewards are active participants in how AI systems use knowledge commons, not passive donors to do it, right? And a public data trust proposal published through the ACM Digital Library argues the strongest version of this idea. A trust could gate access to training data entirely, giving contributors a real negotiating leverage over the company's building models from their collective output, rather than leverage existing that's only on paper, right? And here's my layman's block, right? So, the people building the real infrastructure right now aren't asking, should we build a commons? They're asking who controls the gate. And that's the fight. Whoever controls the gate to the pooled resource controls the value everyone inside it created together. Smarts, motivators, final bosses, warrior. I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about. I hope you get what I'm saying. You're the collective. You're feeding AI, right? You're feeding it. So, we talked about the boardroom. We went to the brain. Let's go back to the brain, right? Because the Neurorights Foundations, which is safeguarding brain data, and they have a report, and then in it was cited Actually, it was mostly audited, right? And it was done in the field. It was reviewed by 30, not one, not 10, not 20, but 30 consumer neurotechnology companies, and found that 29 of 30 appear to allow access to a consumer's neurodata with no meaningful limitations. 73% had a privacy policy on their site. 60% gave consumers no specific information about how their neurodata specifically was handled. We talked about that, right? And that's not a data commons, right? That laid out is what a commons requires, right? And we talked about that. Part of that is transparency, right? The transparency, contributed governance, fiduciary duty. And what the Neuro Rights Foundation documented is the opposite. Companies collecting the most intimate data category that exists, direct signals from your nervous system, and running it through standard commercial terms of service instead of anything resembling trust governance, right? Here's my latest block, right? When you sync meditation headbands, right, which is a focused wearable device, or any consumer BCI, you're not contributing to a commons. Per this audit that I'm speaking of, in the overwhelming majority of cases, you're donating to a private company proprietary data set, right? Which almost has no meaningful limitation on where the data goes, right? The industry's own numbers says so. It was audited, 29 out of 30 companies, right? That's the layman's block. Now, lawyers, that is your line that's in the ground. It's in the sand, right? That's your line. 29 out of 30 companies, right? Let's continue. That was the layman's block, right? So the law, which has to catch up eventually and hopefully, right? Because right now, this is the Wild Wild West, right? Because the legal response is real, but it's fragmented. We talked about that. As of this broadcast right now, four states have active neurodata laws. We talked about that on the last show. California's SB 1223, Colorado's 2024, Montana's SB 163 with its warrant requirement, and Connecticut's CTDPA amendment that was effective July 1st of this year, both of which classified neurodata as sensitive data requiring heightened consent, right? 6 more states have neurodata privacy bills pending as of mid this year. Connecticut's broader amendment, Illinois, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Montana's continued expansions, and Vermont. And per a Vermont legislative briefing filed by the Neuro Rights Foundation policy team in April of this year, at the federal level, the MIND Act, signed in September 2025, empowers the FTC to oversee neurodata governance, but a comprehensive federal neurodata privacy statute still has not cleared committee, right? That, my friends, we talked about that in depth on the last show. If you haven't, go check out the last show, man, the last merger, which was 285. Right? 285. Go check out that episode, man. We went into the detail of that. Now the latest block, right? 46 states, right? And as of tonight, have zero specific neurodata protection in the books. And that number hasn't moved since merger 30, right? And we're on merger 32, right? And if you live outside of California, Colorado, Montana, and Connecticut, the only thing standing between your brain signal and a company's server right now is the company's own privacy policy, right? Which means almost nothing is in practice, right? Nothing's in practice, legally anyway, right? So, we have to have a cost confession. We have to have a cost confession. So let's talk about it, right? And so, family, final bosses, community, here's the cost confession, right? Because every framework I've laid out tonight, the C factor, the data commons, the data trust, sounds like it's describing a fair trade. It contributes your mind And it gets smarter because of the collective, right? And that's the sell pitch every platform makes. And here's the uncomfortable math behind it, right? A high collective intelligence group, per Woolley and Riddle own research, isn't measured by what it gives back to an individual contributor. It's measured by group task performance, full stop, right? Nothing in that research says the value generated gets redistributed to the people who feed the system, right? The Open Data Institute's 6-feature framework requires benefit sharing mechanisms for something to legally qualify as a trust. Almost nothing you interact with today has one, right? And here's my own personal cause confession, right? As your host, as the final boss, I've contributed to platforms, tools, and communities for years, believing the collective output would somehow circle back. It hasn't, right? Right? Most of it didn't anyway. And most of it gets captured by whoever owned the platform, not by the people, and definitely not by me. But who built the collective intelligence that made the platform valuable at the first place? That's not bitterness, but we built it. They wouldn't have it if it wasn't for us. And that's the audited reality of how almost every community and collective is actually structured right now. And I built this segment tonight because I needed to say that plainly on the record before I ask any of you to contribute anything else, right? Do we need a layman's block? No. All right. No layman's block. Let's continue. So, final bosses, that's your money in the bank moment tonight. You need to verify the structure before you contribute to mine, right? Now, what's the real benefit, right? What's the real benefit? Because it's now all extraction. Because real models exist. The Open Data Institute's benefit sharing requirement isn't hypothetical. It's cooperative data trust structures already that operate this way in specific sectors. Agriculture data cooperatives, and some open science consortiums, right? Where contributors hold actual governance votes over how pooled data gets licensed and monetized. MIT's Center for Collective Intelligence has run applied projects on exactly this question, including work with climate collab platforms, an online citizen collaboration model, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change highlighted for successfully harnessing collective intelligence towards climate solutions, with contributor participation built into the platform's design rather than bolted on afterwards, right? And here's my layman's block, right? Listen, the difference between a commons and an extraction machine isn't the technology. It's whether contributors got a seat in the governance table before the system launched or after it was already profitable and had no reason to give one up. Ask the question about anything. Ask the question about anything that's asking for your data, your time, or your mind, right? Ask it. Was I invited to govern this or just invited to feed it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the layman's block. And guess what? You're feeding the machine. You're feeding the machine, right? So here's the platform. Let's talk about corporate capture risk, right? Let's talk about that, right? So here's the pattern. The doctoral research keeps documenting across sectors, right? Because open contributor built commons frequently get captured once they become valuable. Wikipedia links are examples cited repeatedly in the collective intelligence literature as premier examples of human swarm collaboration. Both survived capture attempts specifically because their governance and licensing were locked into open structures before they became commercially indispensable, right? Most emerging data commons doesn't have the protection yet. The reclaiming of the digital commons proposal published through the ACM explicitly names the danger without enforcing gating mechanisms. Private AI developers can, and the research states plainly do, right? Draw freely from digital commons and crowd worker contributions with no negotiating leverage return to the people who built the resource, right? And here's the latest spot. Right? Here's the latest spot. Wikipedia didn't get captured because somebody built the legal walls early and made them expensive to tear down. Most of what's being called a commons or community in 2026 has no walls at all yet, right? That's not an accident because walls are expensive to build and inconvenient for whoever wants to eventually sell that very thing, right? So that was our latest block. You know, there's one more layer that's specific to neural collective data, and it comes from the Neural Rights Foundation, and it has 5 pillars that include the right not to be subjected to neural discrimination, meaning protection against bias embedded in algorithms trained on pooled neural data. Because when your individual brain signal gets folded into a collective training set, the resulting model can encode patterns that get used to sort, rank, or discriminate against people who share your neural profile, whether or not you personally ever consented to the downstream use, right? This is the same structural problem that we talked about earlier when we were talking about swarm research. And it was flagged from the biology side. And it asks, once you're a node in a well-functioning collective system, you may never see what the system does with your contribution. In a beehive, that's fine. In a hiring algorithm trained on collective cognitive biometric data, that's a civil rights problem with no name in most states' laws yet, right? And here's my language block. Your individual contribution to a neural commons doesn't stay individual once it's pooled. It becomes a pattern that can be used to judge people who look statistically similar to you in ways neither of you agreed to and neither of you can trace back to a specific decision. That was the latest block, right? Now I want to take a brief moment and look at the community. Who's in? Who's in tonight? Who's in? I see Chan, I see Forbes, Official Sunny. I see you. And we got Jacondi, of course. We got Carlton. We got a generic name. I see all you guys, man. Listen, you're part of the community. You're part of this journey that we're on together, man. You know, to my smarts, my final boss, my warriors, my final bosses, my motivators. What a time to be alive, man. What a time to be alive, right? What a time to be alive. Now, you know, we have the cause confession. Now, let's get into the uncomfortable verdict, right? And here's the verdict. And it's not comfortable, right? And think about this. I want you to sit with this, right? Because collective consciousness, the real, the measured, the replicated, the phenomenon that we spoke of early is genuinely more intelligent than an individual in it. That part is scientifically true and not up for debate. But intelligence and ownership are two completely different questions. And right now, in the year of our Lord, in this month of August 2026, almost every collective system built to harvest that intelligence from consumer neurotech to AI training pipelines has solved the intelligence problem and left the ownership problem for someone else to fight about later, right? 29 out of 30 neurotech companies, right? I bet you some of you didn't know there were that many neurotech companies out there, and there are more. 46 states with zero neuro data protection. A federal mine act that oversees but doesn't yet regulate comprehensively. A digital commons that's private AI developers can draw from freely, per the ACM's own research, with no leverage return. The uncomfortable truth you're already is this. Listen, guys, you're already contributing to the collectives that are smarter because of you and richer because of you. And in the overwhelming majority of documented cases, you have no enforceable claim on either outcome, right? We're feeding the beast. And that's not a future risk per every source that was mentioned in tonight's episode. That's the current audited 2026 default, right? And here's the layman's block, right? Look, this isn't a call to withdraw from every collective. Wikipedia, Linux, proof collections can work for contributors when the structure is built right. It's a call to stop assuming the structure is built right until you've checked, right? Now, that bass outside of the studio is insane. That's crazy. Did I ever hear that? Now let's talk about the personal sovereignty protocol, right? We got 5 steps. Same discipline from Mergers 30 protocol, right? And we're going to apply it to anything asking for your collective contribution. Number 1, ask if it's structured as a trust or contract. 6 features from the Open Data Institute purpose, right? Open Data Institute. Number 1 is purpose. Number 2 is the legal structure. Number 3 is rights and duties. Number 4 is the decision-making process. Number 5 is the benefit sharing. Number 6 is the sustainable funding. If a platform can't answer all 6, like I said earlier, assume contract, not trust, right? Number 2, ask who governs it, right? Contributor votes or a board that answers to shareholders. That single fact predicts almost everything else about where the value flows. And then number 3, ask what happens to the pooled output. Does it stay open, right? Is licensing go back to the contributors per the CC signals model? Or does it become somebody's proprietary training set with your signal buried in it, right? Which is, mind you, untraceable, right? And then number 4, for anything neurospecifically, check your state. 4 states protect you today. If you're not in California, Colorado, Montana, or Connecticut, you got to treat every neurotech product as unprotected until the legislation or legislature acts, right? And then number 5, remember what we said not too long ago. Your individual contribution to a collective doesn't stay individual. Ask who else it could be used to judge before you hand it over, right? And here's the layman's block. 5 checks every time before you contribute your mind to anything bigger than yourself. Number 1, trust. Is it a trust or is it a contract? Who governs it? Where does the output go? What your state actually protects? And who else your pattern could be used against, right? Those are the questions you need to be asking. Motivators, that's your action list. Run it before your next sign up, not after, right? That was the layman's block, right? Now, we got what, 15 more minutes? Give me a second. I need a commercial break, right? Give me a second. I need a commercial break. I'll be right back. Give me 2 seconds, right? Commercial break. All right, I'm back. End of the commercial break. Thank you. Oh, we got more people on. Isn't that a winky dink, right? Like I was saying, early on we named the players, right? Who are trying to build real commons infrastructure, right? And here's the one government that actually passed a law to do it. And here's the uncomfortable audit of how it's going, because the EU Data Governance Act became applicable in September of 2023. It created 2 registered categories, which was data intermediation service providers and neural third parties who broker data sharing without taking commercial rights over it. and data altruism organizations, nonprofit entities that collect and process data for the common good without reward, right? Under transparency requirements and mandatory technical separation from any other business line. Sounds good on paper, right? Because data trust concepts codified into actual binding EU law with a public register and a EU issue logo so contributors can verify legitimacy before handing anything over, right? And here's the audit. January this year, there was a review, right, by the law firm Mason Hayes and Current, and they found that EU-wide, only out of it, entire EU-wide, right? Only 11 organizations had registered as data intermediaries, and exactly one had registered as a data altruism organization. One continent-wide, and 2.5 years after the law took effect. The same review flagged that Ireland, a major EU tech hub, still hadn't even designated the national competent authority required to process new applications, right? And here's my language block. This right here is the clearest real-world proof of everything that we've been talking about, right? The legal architecture for trustworthy data commons exists. It's written into binding law in one of the largest economic blocks on earth, and almost nobody has used it because building genuine trust infrastructure is slow, expensive, and unglamorous compared to just launching a platform and writing a terms of service nobody reads anyway, right? Good law without adoption is still just a name on a shelf. And smarts file this away, right? EU data, altruism organization is now a real checkable label. If European platform claims to be a data commons and can't show you that registration, right? Then they're not one. Listen, plain and simple. That's the lamest book, right? Now, what this means for every platform that isn't, what it means is this. If the one jurisdiction that built a legal trust framework only produced one registered data altruism organization in 2.5 years, the honest conclusion for the rest of the world, including the United States, already has shown us that 46 states have zero neurodata protections. And that is almost that's no platform asking for your collective contribution today is operating inside any enforceable trust structure at all, right? That doesn't mean every collective is a scam. Because we talked about that earlier, right? And we showed real working examples. We talked about Wikipedia. We talked about Linux. We talked about MIT's Climate Collab, which is a cooperative data trust in architecture and open science. What separates those successes from the default extraction model isn't a government registration number. It's the contributors build, right? And then it's defended. And they defended it with their own governance rules before the resource became valuable enough for anyone else to want to take it over, right? The EU's experience proves the opposite path. Top-down legal infrastructure without organic contributor demand moves slowly and it gets ignored. The Wikipedia and Linux path, contributor-built governance from day one, is slower to start, but far harder to capture later on, right? Now, let's move on, right? We're going to do a quick recap and close, right? Quick recap. So, you know what? Okay. All right, Steve, I got you. Layman's block, man. Layman's block. Look, don't wait for government registry to tell you a platform is trustworthy. Don't do that, right? Use the 5-step protocol that we mentioned earlier because it's still your fastest real-world check. Remember, trust, or is it a trust or is it a contract? Who governs it? When or where the output goes, what your state protects, and who else your pattern could be used against. The EU spent 2.5 years building an official label almost nobody uses yet. You don't have 2.5 years to wait for regulation to catch up before you decide what to contribute your mind to next. Warriors, that's the real fight underneath tonight's whole entire episode. Not waiting for permission to be protected. Building the habit of checking it yourself each and every time. That's the name of this block. See, man, I got you. Right? So, recap and then close. And then I got to make an announcement. So, recap. Straight, no filler, right? The collective intelligence is real, is measured, and is replicated. The infrastructure to pool human minds at scale, Swarm BCI, data commons, data trust, exists today in this year, 2026, the year of our Lord. This is not future. This is not science fiction. This is sci now, right? Not in some hypothetical future, but sci now, like right now, right? And almost none of it is currently structured to protect the people feeding it. That's you. That's me, right? And 29 out of 30 neuroscience technology companies, 46 states say, guess what? You're unprotected. And that's tonight's doctrine, right? That's MW32 layer 3 of the conscious sovereignty framework. Private, shared, and collective, right? There's only one layer left. And we're going to be talking about the immortal consciousness. What happens to everything we've built across these 4 layers? Private, shared, collective. When the question stops being who can access your mind while you're alive and becomes who happens, or I should say, what happens to it after you're not. That's going to be in MW33. Don't miss it. It's going to be next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, a week from today, right? A week from today, we're going into MW33, right? And here's the brass tacks again. A crowd can think better than any person in it. That doesn't mean the crowd owns you. Somebody still has to own the room. Smarts, build a 6-feature checklist into how you evaluate every problem or platform. Final bosses, the cost confession from earlier rides with you this week, right? Motivators, run the 5-step protocol before your next sign up. Warriors, 29 out of 30. That's the information. That's the line. Don't forget that number. Ladies and gentlemen, I am the final boss. This has been the Final Boss Podcast. To my smarts, my warriors, my final bosses, my motivators, thank you for joining us. Everybody in the community, everyone who's joining us for the first time. This is Season 4, The Rebirth, Arc 5, The Declaration. Merger Wednesdays number 32 and episode number 290 of the Final Boss Podcast. We're 10 episodes away from the harvest, which starts on episode number 300. That is our show. Thank you for joining us. It has been a good time, man. Look, it's been a good time. I really, really thoroughly enjoy doing this, man. And if, like I said before, at midnight, go time 2, the train has left the station. It's out. It's out. Go time 2, the train has left the station. It's out. In the meantime, before it drops, go get go time 1 and softback or hardback. Or get both. So if I see you, I can sign the hardback, right? Then get go time 2. The train has left the station. Then you have the 2 books in the series, right? Go get them. Go get them. Go get them. The link is at the bottom of the page. That's our show for tonight, man. Thank you for joining us. And as always, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's an even heavier pain that comes with regret. I am here. We are here. Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. And if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I will see you next time. I might see you tomorrow for a special guest. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know, man. The book drops. So I gotta see. I'm gonna be super busy dealing with that. But yeah, I'm out. Y'all have a good one. See you then.
It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory. They're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware. We're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week, we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.